Oh wait, this is the wrong screen. You saw nothing! You saw nothing. Because I make no mistakes. I am the perfect Nulag, Witch Briny, who is coming to you live from the Forbidden Library. Yes, nothing to see there. No mistakes ever, obviously. Hello, everyone. Hello, Boris. Hello, Maximka? Hello, Dropstick. Hello, Void. Hello, Noko-chan. Hello, Naruto. Yes, I do remember you. I believe you are going to come back in a year. You're early. And can you make a matcha tea in a Kool-Aid / pitcher jug thing? No, I don't believe you could. Or at least I'd consult Google on such a thing, because you need to have a very small amount for matcha, and then you need a whisk or a milk whisk or something along those lines. I believe I did point you to a rather wonderful article which gave you many tips on making matcha tea. So that I would suggest you stick to one of those methods to get the best out of your matcha. And that is your tea law for the day. But today we're here to talk about Frankenstein lore. Yes, we're starting to learn just how much the film version of "Okay, I'm coming back in a year, thank you for not being welcoming, bye, okie dokie Naruto, you do you." I don't want to scroll up to get the link though. Well, that's just your laziness then, isn't it? Then you just suffer with your subpar matcha, I suppose. Or you could, Google it yourself. You do have the power of the internet in your palms. What were we doing? Yes, I was going to try and give you a small recap of everything in Frankenstein so far. We have read 47% of this book. Aren't we doing so well? It is a rather chunky book, is it not? It's going to take us a good 6 streams to get through it, I believe, and this is the 5th one already. But we've only got halfway, so I actually might have to use more streams. Before going, what's up with the accent? Well, you see, I possessed Briny over the Halloween period, and I'm allowed to continue streaming Frankenstein as I started it, therefore it is my streams. So my name is Nulak / Witch Briny, and this is who I am. But anyway, we're going to recap. Yes, recap. So, is it giving you darker vibes? Wonderful. Then that's what it's supposed to do. Yay! Anyway. So, our Victor Frankenstein lived happily with his family. They adopted his cousin. This is soothing to you, really? Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you are enjoying it. I can't tell if you're being sarcastic. Anyway, Victor lived a happy life in the mountains with his family in Geneva. And then they... No, I'm not doing anything in the normal voice. This is my voice! What are you talking about? And they adopted his cousin, who he may or may not really fancy. She's not blood related, and we all know how that sounds. Anyway, he got very into strange alchemical things, and then he eventually went to... Yes, this is the actual voice, yes. This is how I sound, all the time. I don't know why you think I'm any different. If you believe... What? I'm getting so distracted. Nulag is processing right now. Yes, so he went on to a college, and in that college, I'm not sarcastic, you really like hearing the accent. Oh, thank you, Mr. Maximka. I do appreciate it. And in the college, he learned about actual science. They actually did laugh at him for a little while for believing in the alchemy and things that he did. But one of the professors was rather kind and brought him in. And then he started thinking about, how can I stop death? Because that just is how you do things. That's what you think of, obviously. So he starts getting into a bit of scientific fervour and getting body parts and stitching them together, and he's going to make a perfect man, and it's going to be amazing. And then he makes the man, and the man gets up, and he's like, oh no, what have I done? Oh no. And he starts getting really scared of the man, because he has basically made a zombie. And therefore he runs away from said zombie, and runs into his friend, his childhood friend, who has come to also learn at this establishment. And they stay together for a little while. He helps Victor through his PTSD of making a monster, as far as he's concerned. It's been a horrible monster, and eventually he goes home to visit his family, only to find his younger brother has been murdered! And it would seem it was by a childhood friend again. Yes, I am Witch Bridie, the even fancier Bridie, indeed. And, oh no, I can't hang out with Queen Lizzie anymore, unfortunately. She was a delight. I do love that clip of her when she sees the cows coming. I do suggest finding that gif where she just looks so happy to see some cows. It's rather adorable. You'll be back in a year. No need to say bye. Okay. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to you anyway, Naruto. Goodbye. Have fun. Chapter 13. Yes. Oh, hello, Red Candy Guy. Hello. Yes, his brother got killed, and it might have been because of a childhood friend who also got killed because she was framed for the murder. Victor was convinced that it was his monster because he saw him around, and now he has finally met his monster, his creation, who has convinced him to listen to his story and how he survived this whole time. So now he has started to regale us with his tale and how he is learning about the world around him. He found himself hiding in a small pigsty next to a farming house where he could see inside via the walls, and he got very familiar with the three inhabitants, an older brother, a younger sister, and a blind father, who are struggling with poverty and the farming and all that stuff. So that is where we will be starting off today. I believe he is going to start learning language, so I am wondering how he became so eloquent in his storytelling, despite not knowing any words to begin with. Let's begin, shall we? And now I hastened to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impress me with feelings which, from what I have been, made me what I am. He's not within the walls, no, he's actually outside them. It's simply that the cottage has a peek hole in it. You can see what they're doing inside. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what was... We haven't warmed up today. Give it a minute. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days, when my cottagers periodically rested from labour, the old man played on his guitar, and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy, beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music when someone tapped on the door. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question, to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing in a sweet accent the name of Felix. So there's still a lot of book left. Oh boy, I can't wait till Bryony starts reading Christmas books. But then it's still new luck reading Frankenstein. Well, no, we don't really have a lot of time on the channel to be able to read multiple books. I also don't have a Christmas book lined up. Though I suppose we could always read The Christmas Carol. Well, that would be lovely. But that would have to be her. Far too much Christmas cheer for my liking. He should have stayed humbug the entire time. That would have been better. On hearing this word, Felix came up hesitantly to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil. I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression, her hair of a shining raven black, and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated, her features of regular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy. Wait, though the Christmas story with the grumpy old man and the three ghosts is a classic? Well, yes, of course it is. Where did you think it came from, the Muppets? It instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy, of which I could hardly have believed it capable. His eyes sparkled as his cheeks flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings, wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes. She held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously, and called her, as well as I could diminish, his sweet Arabian. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the man's feet, and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately. Ah, how very sweet. I soon perceived that although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood by nor myself understood the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness, though the cottage dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates the morrow mists. Felix became particularly happy with smiles of delight, welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the ever-gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and pointing to her brother made signs which appeared to mean that he had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenances, expressed joy, the cause of which I did not comprehend. Presently I found, by the frequent reoccurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavouring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions, to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words at the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I had before understood, but I profited by the others. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, my sweet Sapphi." They sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty possible to that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. Made many signs I could not comprehend. Does fast-moving hand signs transform? Dude turns into a better Nulog. No. God, gosh, no. There's no such thing as a better Nulog, of course. The next morning, Felix went out to his work, and after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who first declined. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents, but unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger. The old man appeared enraptured, and said some words which Agatha endeavoured to explain to Safie, by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed as peacefully as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in the countenance of my friends. Safie was always gay and happy. She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words that were uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile also the black ground was covered with herbage, with the green banks interspread with innumerable flowers, sweet to the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clearer and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I had formerly endured in the first village which I had entered. My days were spent in close attention, that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters, as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field of wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safie was Volney's Ruins of Empires. So he's learning together with her. Correct, Mr. Maximica. Very much correct. It's very convenient for him that a foreigner happened to turn up, that is for sure. I should not have understood the purport of this book had Felix, in reading it, given a very minute explanations. He had chosen this work, he said, because of the declamatory style, was favoured in imitation of the Eastern authors. Through this work I obtained cursory knowledge of history, and a view of several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Aztecics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the war and wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of the subsequent decline of the mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere, and wept with Safie over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. Oh, damn. I feel like Obviously, this was written a very long time ago. That might have been quite controversial back then. What if someone had a name that was so hard to pronounce that it made you bite your tongue? Then I would never pronounce it. I would ask them if I could call them a nickname. You can just call me Max, but the first time you pronounce it was actually correct. I would love to be able to repeat that, but apparently I can't. So Max it is! You can be Mr. Max. That is so much easier. Thank you very much. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. I was, indeed, at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base. He appeared at one time, a mere scion of evil principle, and at the other as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared to be the highest honour that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth and murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Every conversation while the cottagers now opened new wonders to me, while I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian. The strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. Does he refer to man as mankind? Correct, very much so. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied, decent untied with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered, except in the very rare instances, as a vagabond, and a slave doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. And what of I? Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon coarser diets. I bore an extremeness of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. So if you run out of classics and you don't have permission from any authors, what you do is a compromise. There are plenty of authors out there. There really is. I will never run out. You really don't understand how many classics there are as well. Every year there's more, because there's more every time a book turns 70, it becomes a classic. Very recently, Winnie the Pooh has actually become a classic. So I could read the original Winnie the Pooh. One small story, actually. I was out shopping, you see. And I found this murder mystery game book that actually technically was a classic. That's something we can do on the stream. I was very excited to find it. I took a picture of it. What was it called? Let me see. But I was very excited to find a game book in a classics. I do very much would love to do a game book. There are many out there where you can do a kind of role-play session in your books, where you can even roll dice and do combat, and basically the book itself becomes your GM. It is very fun, and I would love to do one on stream. Let me find my pictures. It's upside down. Good me. Good gracious me. Why can't I take a straight thing? Cain's jawbone. Could I play it with chat? If we could do it via voting and things like that, that would be good. So if the Nulag series becomes 70, does that become a classic? Well, it becomes open domain, which technically, yes, is a classic. Yes, but I'm always a classic, obviously. I have been classic since I began. The more books to read, then life presents the opportunity to actually read. Exactly. And what do you define as classic, by the way? What I'm talking about when I say classic is open domain books. Things that have fallen out of copyright, really. Because those are the kind of books I can read on the stream, and I don't have to worry about any publishers coming after me. Some might say Nulag is timeless! I am timeless, Boris! Perfect, yes! That's exactly correct! But yes, that's what I'm referring to. There are other books I can read, and a few authors that... indie authors that I have discussed with, that I can potentially read those books, but yes, things that copyright won't throw a stink about. Like, I couldn't come here and read Percy Jackson or anything like that, because obviously there's big publishing houses behind them. And when you open a book, most of the time, in the copyright page, you will see something along the lines of, do not... Oh, let's see if I can actually just find it in a book that I have. Oh, I'm older than time itself. What do you want about? I've been here much longer than anyone here. What is it? No part of this text may be reappropriated, transmitted, downloaded, decompiled, reverse-engined, or stored in any form, or introduced into any information store or retrieval system in any form by any means, whether electronic or mechanical, without express permission from the author. That is usually what it says in most books. So it's a case of trying to avoid that. Outverse Nulag. Yes, that sounds very good, doesn't it? I like that. Where was I? I did get distracted for a hot minute there. Now. Not even the same nature of man. Yes, more agile in his frame. Yes. My stature far exceeds theirs. When I look around, I saw and heard of none like me. I was, then, a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled and whom all men disowned. I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever remained in my naive wood, nor known nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Of what a strange nature is knowledge! It clings to the mind when it has once seized onto it, like a lichen on a rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain. And that was death. The ability to forget seems rather important to such timeless sentient beings, so they could entertain themselves, though through countless fluxes of time. Yes. I do enjoy being able to forget the TV series, which I love. Forgetting spoilers is one of the greatest abilities known to man. Wait, do you actually understand power scaling? Yes, of course I do. Of course. Quite insulted, do you think I wouldn't? a state which I feared, yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amicable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, and by that he means having a conversation. You get your mind out of the gutter. Except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had to become one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man and the lively conversation of the loved Felix were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch! Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the different sexes, and the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of an infant, and the lively sallies of the other older child, how all life and cares of the mother were wrapped in the precious charge, how the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and all various relationships which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. Didn't you tell me to get my mind out of the gutter last New Lug stream, though? Well, yes. You can never not be reminded to get out of the gutter more. Not what the words. That was not correct. That was not what I wanted to express. You can never be told to get out of the gutter enough times. What am I trying? What is the sentence I am reaching for here? 1 second. Let's search for it in my brain. This monster is so much more eloquent than I am. You can never be told to get out of the gutter more times. There's no limit to how many times you can be told to get out of the gutter. I think that's what I'm trying to say. My mind isn't the gutter. It's the whole ditch. My God, Jake. That's a large ditch. So he describes the problem of knowledge and responsibility which comes with it. Yes, correct, Miss Max, correct. He seems rather pessimistic about it. Well, yes, well, that's because he has had life inflicted upon him as a monstrous wretch who is ugly and tall and generally completely misunderstood by anyone around him. His countenance and smell puts everyone off. So he loathes the knowledge that he got. You're not in the gutter, though? Then that's fine. That's fine. It might not have been for you, boy. That might have been for Jake, evidently. But it seems that the gutter is too large for Jake to get out. Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. No, we did that one. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days. No mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or if they had, all in my past life was now a blot. A blind vacancy in which I distinguished nothing. From my earliest remembrance, I had been as I then was, in the height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again reoccurred, to be answered with only groans. It's true that at least 6 feet deep... Wait, throw it on me. Well, if I can't save you, I may as well give you a proper burial. I soon will explain to what those feelings tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose story excites me in such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors. For I loved in an innocent, half-painful self-deceit, to call them. I mean, he still could potentially bear hope and aspirations. It depends on the state of mind. And personality, rather, I think. That is an interesting take on it so far. We'll see if his experiences have changed that pessimism. At the moment, we're not sure what has led up to the situation in which he is telling this story, so let us see. In Chapter 14... Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I. What if normal Bryony had Sharagon eyes? I don't know. I suppose she would look something like this. But I don't need to wear those, no. The name of the old man was de Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France, where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Agatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large, luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement of intellect, or taste accompanied by a moderate fortune could afford. The father of Safi had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish merchant who had inhabited Paris for many years. When, for some reason which I could not learn, he became obnoxious of the government, he was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople to join them. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime alleged against him, had been the cause of his condemnation. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable. When he heard the decision of the court, he made, at that moment, a solemn vow to deliver him, and then looked around for means. After many failed attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strongly grated window in an unguarded part of the building, which lighted the dungeon from the unfortunate Muhammadan, who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the great knight and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favour. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavoured to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promise of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt. Yet when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who, by her gestures, expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward his toil and hazard. Constantinople, I thought it was called Stamboul in that time. It potentially could have been, and this might have been a mistake. Or this book is maybe not as old as we think it is. Does this detail reflect the fact that he read a bull about ancient civilizations, so he called it that way? Oh, that's a good spot, Mr. Max. Very much so. That could be it. That could very much be it. The Turk quickly perceived the impression that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix, and endeavoured to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage, so soon as he should be conveyed to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept this offer, yet he looked forward to the probability of the event, as to the consummation of his happiness. I think this book was made in the 1700s or 1800s. Shall we look? We do have the power of the internet. When was Frankenstein written? 1818 is when it was written. So early 1800s. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover, by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services towards her parent, and at the same time she gently deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters, for I found means, during my residence in the hovel, to procure the implements of writing, and the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun has already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safie related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Recommended for her by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Safie, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter in the tenets of her religion, and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and independence of the spirit forbidden to female followers of Muhammad. I am really surprised that I did not, put two and two together as to what that is. The original language of the protagonist is French. Yes, it would seem. I wasn't sure if it was German, actually. But it seems that the monster's first language would be French. This lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the mind of Safie, who sickened at the proposal of again returning to Asia and being immured within the walls of a harem, allowing only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul. Now accustomed to the grand ideas and a noble emulation of virtue, the prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take rank in society was enchanting to her. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night of the previous to it he quitted his prison, and before the morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plan to the former, who aided in the deceit by quitting his house under the presence of a journey and concealed himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix had conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons, and across Mont-Saint and Lehorn, where the merchant had decided it to wait a favourable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safie resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that he should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectation of that event. Well, I imagine at this time, especially with this being written by someone in England, the lot of the East probably seemed like rather the same thing. Unless you were someone who worked in international business or talked to international people, then I imagine a lot of the continent of Asia and the East in general likely all blurred together to the average Brit. They probably do now, to be honest, I'm not going to lie. I know that's rather insulting to many. But back in the 1880s, you can't say travel and knowledge was easily distributed among the world, so there was not much in the way of understanding at that point. Now it's just straight up ignorance more than anything. In the meantime, he enjoyed society of the Arabian, who exhibited towards him the simplest and tendernesses of affection. I mean, we thought America was Asia for a while, so yes, that's a good point. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safi sang to him the divine airs of her native country. Not much in the way of understanding. Google wasn't invented. Correct, yes. Really, when Google was invented, after that, it's just ignorance. Ignorance and laziness to not really learn about other things like that. If you always have questions, there is the Google to know all the things. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed other plans. He loathed the idea of his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer. If he should choose to betray him to the Italian state, which they had inhabited, he revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it might be no longer necessary, and secretly take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. The government of France were greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and De Lacy and Agatha were thrown into prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasures. I want to learn about Nulog's backstory. I know, I'll use Google. Of course Google's not going to know that. I'm from a different world, so how could your Google ever know about that? Your Google only knows everything about your world, not mine. Thrown into prison. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon while he enjoyed free air and the society of her whom he loved. This idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favourable opportunity for escape, Felix could return to Italy. Safi should remain as a boarder at a convent in Leghorn, and then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free De Lacy and Agatha by his proceedings. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile of their native country. They found themselves in a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, from whom he and his family endured such unheard-of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honour, and had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. Wow, what an arse. So if I'm not mistaken, There are Turk father Felix Safi. The Turk was captured by the government. Safi made an acquaintance with Felix. He fell in love. Felix decided to help, which he did, but the Turk does not like the fact that his daughter being with a Christian, so he plotted something. Yes. Well, he's a traitor just like you. Yes, he is, Void. You are a traitor. To all of us. To me and Bryony. I have not followed. No, that's correct. What he plotted was to basically take his daughter back with him, rather than promising his daughter's hand in marriage. And that he had no intention of paying Felix for his goodwill. So, when he heard that Felix and his family had their fortunes ruined and been exiled, he did not send them any help or any aid. Nor did he allow his daughter to go see him. So we can only assume, at this point, that Safi managed to find her way to Felix on her own and ran away from her father. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, while this distress had been the meed of his virtue. He gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes misfortunes were more bitter and irreparable. 1 second, I need to hydrate. No problem, Mr. Max. I am happy to summarize if you're not following along. I'll admit, because this is a rather old story, then it can be used quite flowery language that can be quite difficult at times. However, I appreciate that you're still trying to follow along, because it means that you'll be learning, and that is always good. It's never too late to learn things. Tee-hee, or maybe I'm just mischievous and a little prankster, or maybe just a dirty traitor, one or the other. The Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi, the arrival of the Arabian now infused new life in his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but prepared to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command. She attempted to explicate with her father, but he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate. Flowery as in inappropriate, or flowery as in two alternatives. I was thinking flowery as in rather descriptive, or using rather pretty language, but sometimes pretty language can be hard to pass through. You see how you see a lot of flowers together in a bed. Sometimes it can be hard to see the individual flowers. So they can be quite complicated when put together. A few days after, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence at Leghorn had been divulging, and that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him. Flour is tasty. They have a soft texture. What are you, gone, you? He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which the city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant, to follow at her leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved in her own mind the plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike averse to it. By some papers of her father, which fell into her hands, she had heard of the exile of her lover, and learned the name of the spot where he resided in. She hesitated some time, but at length she formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her, and a sum of money, she quitted Italy and attended with an attendant, a native from Leghorn, who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived safely at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, where her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safie nursed her with the most devoted affection, but the poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country, and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and after her death the woman of the house which they had lived took care that Safie should arrive in the safety at the cottage of her lover. Oh, what a lucky girl Miss Safie was! She could have been in quite a lot of trouble if she'd ended up in a country not knowing the language and not knowing where to go. What a lovely cottage owner. And that brings us to chapter 15. Such was the history of my beloved cottagers. It impressed me deeply. I learned from their views of social life, which it developed, to admire their virtues and to depreciate the vices of mankind. As yet I looked upon crime as a distant evil. Benevolence and generosity were ever present before me, inciting which, with me, a desire to become an actor in the busy scene, where so many admirable qualities were called forth and displayed. But in giving an account of the progress of my intellect, I must not omit a circumstance which occurred in the beginning of the month of August of the same year. One night, during my accustomed visit to the neighbouring wood, where I collected my own food and brought home firing for my protectors, I found on the ground a leathern portmanteau containing several articles of dresses and some books. I eagerly seized the prize and returned to my hovel. Fortunately, the books were written in the language, the elements of which I had acquired at the cottage. They consisted of Paradise Lost, a volume of Plutarch's Lives, and The Sorrows of Werther. The possessions of these treasures gave me extreme delight. Now I continually studied and exercised my mind upon these histories, whilst my friends were employed in their ordinary occupations. I had hardly described to you the effects of these books. They produced in me an infinity of new images and feelings that sometimes raised me to ecstasy, but in more frequent sunk me to the lowest dejection. In the Sorrows of Werther, besides the interest of its simple and affecting story, so many opinions are canvassed and so many lights are thrown upon what hitherto been to me obscured subjects. What I found in it a never-ending source of speculation and astonishment. Will the Forbidden Library ever be an actual book? And no, I'm not counting that chat thing on the right side of you as a book. Wait, what? The Forbidden Library itself will never be an actual book. What do you want about? The library itself is a library. It's where you put the books. The library does not belong in a book. In the gentle and domestic manners it described, combined with lofty sentiments and feelings, which had for their object something out of self accorded well with my experience among my protectors, and with the wants which were for ever alive in my own bosom. Like, will you write a story based around it? Probably not, no. Or at least I don't have any plans to do so. I believe there is a book series I need to finish before I think about any more books. But a story based around it? Maybe. Maybe I could do some short stories about some shenanigans that happen in the Forbidden Library. I suppose it is possible. I don't have any particular ideas about it right now, but it's definitely a setting that can be used. But I thought Were to himself a more divine being that I had ever beheld or imagined. His character contained no pretension, but it sank deep. The disquietings upon death and suicide were calculated to fill me with wonder. Time to start your philosophy. Oh, potential for things that aren't Moon Girl, more superhero stuff? I'm saying that the potential of the library is a thing. I mean, I have plenty of ideas for books. That's just how being a writer is. You have many ideas. But it takes a very long time to write them. And I'm not talking about them with you. You'll have to wait and see if they ever manifest themselves. Besides, it would be far too much of a departure from Frankenstein for me to start going through my writing ideas now. That would be its own stream, it really would. Would calculate to fill me with wonder. I did not pretend to enter into the merits of the case, yet I inclined towards the opinions of the hero, whose extinction I wept, without precisely understanding it. As I read, however, I applied much personally to my own feelings and condition. I found myself similar, yet at the same time strangely unlike the beings concerning whom I read, and to whose conversation I was a listener. I sympathized with, and partly understood them, but I was uninformed in mind. I was dependent on none to relate to. I was dependent on none and related to none. The path of my departure was free, and there was none to lament my annihilation. Writing stories is actually hard. Writing books is even harder. It requires such level of knowledge and preparations and thought put into it, not just several bright ideas, but a whole heap of them connecting together. Indeedy it does, and especially with a whole series. Did you know? I think there's someone else who needs to talk at this point. Just a hot second. Did you know I wrote books? Did you know I wrote books? I wrote 4 books. They're superhero books. There are links in the description. You should go buy them. Thank you, Dulak! I'm sorry, I could feel her very much wanting to shill. Because, if you have the opportunity, you should always shill. Getting them accepted and seen is so much... It is, and I admit that part might have been skipped. There is so much as a self-publishing, Well, you don't have to get them accepted, you can just throw them out there. Which is why, how Moon Girl is a thing. But anyway, I digress. I could do a whole stream on that again as well. On publishing and writing and whatnot. My departure was free, and there was none to lament my annihilation. My person was hideous, and my stature gigantic. What did this mean? Who was I? What was I? Whence did I come? What was my destination? These questions continually reoccurred, but I was unable to solve them. Exactly, Void, yes! That person that came up for a hot second there has written 5 books, and one of them is coming out next month. How exciting is that? The volume of Poltrock's Lives, which I possessed, contained the histories of the first founders of the ancient republics. This book had a far different effect upon me from the Sorrows of Water. I hope I will never have to write interesting stories because it's so hard. Just writing articles is hard already, and reviewers are always so critical. At least, yes, it is hard. And I believe that when you are writing something that is fictional, then the critiques come hit hard. They hit hard, that is for sure, because it is very personal at that point. Yes, you should, Void. You should. You should be interested in Moon Girl 4, that is for sure. 1 second. Yes, writing is difficult. And also very scary to put out, that is for sure. Thank you, thank you. I learned from Werther's imaginations despondency and gloom, but Polchark taught me high thoughts. He elevated me above the wretched sphere of my own reflections, to admire and love the heroes of past ages. Many things I read surpassed my understanding and experience. I had a very confused knowledge of kingdoms, wide extents of country, mighty rivers, and boundless seas, but I was perfectly unacquainted with towns and large assemblages of men. The cottage of my protectors had been the only school in which I had studied human nature, but this book developed new and mightier scenes of attraction. I read of men concerned in public affairs, governing or massacring their species. I felt the greatest ardour for virtue rise within me, and abhorrence for vice. As far as I understood the significance of those terms, relative as they were, as I applied them to pleasure and pain alone, induced by these feelings, I was, of course, led to admire peaceable lawgivers, Nuum, Solon, and Lycorus, in preference to Romulus and Theseus. These patriarchal lives of my protectors caused these impressions to take a firm hold on my mind. Perhaps if my first introduction to humanity had been made by a young soldier, burning for glory and slaughter, I should have been imbued with the different sensations. I bet a lot of critics of my story would have hurt a lot, considering I think the main criticisms would be the self-insert and chameleon. I can see chameleon ways I can get bad reviews. Oh, Void. Besides, it was a fan fiction. Yours was a fan fiction, and it's supposed to be wild and silly and wonderful and just a lot of fun, and that's all your fan fiction was. That's why it was 10 out of 10 for what it was trying to be. But Paradise Lost excited different and far deeper emotions. I read it as I had read of the other volumes which had fallen into my hands. As a true history, it moved every feeling of wonder in a way that the picture of an omnipotent God warring with his creatures was capable of exciting. I often referred to my several situations as their similarity struck me to my own. Like Adam, I was apparently untied by no link to any other being in existence. But his state was far different from mine, in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his Creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature. But I was wretched, helpless, and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition, For often, like him, I viewed the bliss of my protectors, and bitter gall of envy rose within me. I wrote fan fiction once, long ago. Twice, actually. It was utter cringe. Fan fiction is very fun, and if you can get me to 1,000 subscribers, I will read you some of the cringe fanfic I wrote in my youth. Power of friendship as the Minecrafters jump into the nether, indeed. Ooh, he is trying to find himself in books and associate with the protagonist. He is. This is very much a lot of self-actualization for him. Another circumstance strengthened and confirmed my feelings. Soon after my arrival in the hovel, I discovered some papers in the pocket of the dress which I had taken from your laboratory. At first I had neglected them, but now I was able to decipher the characters in which they were written. I began to study them with diligence. It was your journal of the 4 months that preceded my creation. You minutely described in these papers every step you took in the process of your work. This history was mingled with accounts of domestic occurrences. You doubtless recollected these papers. Here they are. Everything is related in them which bears reference to my accursed origin, with the whole detail of that series of disgusting circumstances which produced it is set in my view. The minutest description of my odious and loathsome person is given, in language which painted your own horrors and rendered mine indelible. I sickened as I read. Hateful day when I received life, I exclaimed in agony. Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that you turned from me in disgust? God, in pity, made man beautiful and alluring, after his own image, but my form is a filthy type of yours, more horrid from the very resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and abhorred. Hey, Nulak, there's a Toho character came to new. And would you have reacted at the beginning of your debut if someone told you you must be new here? No, because I would have thought it was just a typo because I have no idea about Toho. He should have read Ugly Duckling or Der Zwergnaze, Little Long Goosey, to associate himself with. Yes, he might have been a little bit more positive after those, but he is not one to grow. So he may not become a beautiful swan, as the duckling did. And these were reflections of my hours of despondency and solitude. But when I contemplated the virtues of the cottage, their admirable and benevolent dispositions, I persuaded myself that when they should become acquainted with my admiration of their virtues, they would compassionate me and overlook my personal deformity. Could they turn from their door one, however monstrous, who solicited their compassion and friendship? I resolved, at least, not to despair, but in every way to fit myself for an interview with them, which would decide my fate. I don't think that would really help if he just covered himself and called himself a leper. He might be accepted with other lepers, I suppose. That might help. It would be better than nothing, though he would have to watch his friends all die from leprosy, which would absolutely suck. And eventually they would figure out that he was not, and then be mad that he was lying to them the whole time. Could they turn? I resolved at least not to despair, but in every way to fit myself for an interview with them that would decide my fate. I postponed this attempt for some months longer, for the importance attached to its success inspired me with a dread lest I should fail. Besides, I found that my understanding improved much with every day's experience, that I was unwilling to commence this undertaking until a few more months should have added to my stagnancy. Basically, I procrastinated. Several changes in the meantime took place in the cottage. The presence of Sapphy diffused happiness among the inhabitants, and I also found that a greater degree of plenty reigned there. Felix and Agatha spent more time in amusement and conversation, and were assisted in their labours by servants. They did not appear rich, but they were contented and happy. Their feelings were serene and peaceful, while mine became every day more tumultuous. Increase of knowledge only discovered me more clearly that what a wretched outcast I was. I cherished hope, it is true, but it vanished when I beheld my person reflected in the water, or my shadow in the moonshine, even as that frail image, and inconstant shade. I endeavoured to crush these fears, to fortify myself for the trial which in a few months I resolved to undergo. And sometimes I allowed my thoughts, unchecked by reason, to ramble in the fields of paradise, and I dared to fancy amiable and lovely creatures sympathizing with my feelings, and cherishing my gloom. Their angelic countenances and breathed smiles of consolation. But it was all a dream. No Eve soothed my sorrows, nor shared my thoughts. I was alone. I remembered Adam's supplication to his Creator, but where was mine? He had abandoned me, and in the bitterness of my heart, I cursed him. Autumn passed thus. I saw with surprise and grief the leaves decay and fall, and nature again assumed the barren and bleak appearance it had worn when I first beheld the woods and lovely moon. Yet I did not heed the bleakness of the weather. I was better fitted by my conformation for the endurance of cold than heat. But my chief delights were the sights of flowers and birds, and all the gay apparel of summer. When those deserted me, I turned with more attention towards the cottagers. Their happiness was not decreased by the absence of summer. They loved and sympathized with one another, and their joys, depending on each other, were not by the casualties that took place around them. The more I saw of them, the greater my desire to claim their protection and kindness. My heart yearned to be known and loved by these amiable creatures, to see their sweet looks directed towards me with affection. When somebody says they cursed someone, do they say a curse word about them, or is it entirely metaphorical? I mean, I don't know if our monster even knows a curse word, but he likely just says, I curse you. It's likely not even metaphorical. He likely just uses those words. I curse you, Victor Frankenstein, for creating me! Probably something along those lines. He is an eloquent baby. I don't think he would use such foul language. The monster just wants to hug. Yes, he does. That is literally all he wants. He just wants someone to not hate him, which is just sad. My heart yearned to be known and loved by these amiable creatures. To see their sweet looks directed towards me with affection was the utmost limit of my ambition. He is about a year old at this point. He is very young. People say curses in replacement for vulgar language at times, no? Yes, they do, but saying I curse you is in fact a valid sentence in itself. I would utter cuss words if something was to go wrong, though. Yes, you would, but you are not an eloquent baby, are you? You are not a 1-year-old man thing that has barely learned language and may not even know any cuss words. I thought curse in general is to carry negative thought targeted at someone precisely. Correct. That is all it is, Mr. Max. Whether what actual words are used is another thing. And curse words, or naughty words, I suppose is just something that is developed in language. That we have just put them in a box of negative connotation and therefore called them curse words. Newlark, are you an eloquent baby then? No, I'm just eloquent, obviously. I'm not a baby. I dared not think that they would turn them from me with disdain and horror. The poor that stopped at their door were never driven away. I asked, is it true, for the greatest treasures, that little food or rest? I required kindness and sympathy, but I did not believe myself utterly unworthy of it. Yes, it is interesting that curse words are so different for people, especially back in the 1818s, like this book has been from. The power of the curse depends on the intentions of the resources used, including curses of the soul. Well, that is also correct, Jake, very much so. For someone, they are like taboos, and for others, they are words that fill gaps in their speech. Correct, very much so. Some people think cuss words are for stress relief. In a way, they kind of are. And there are some times when the emphasis just isn't correct without particular curse words. It's about getting the right... Vibe is not the word I want to use, but vibe is the word we're using. Sometimes you just need the curse word to get a particular vibe out. Saying I'm so annoyed and I'm so fucking annoyed are most definitely two different vibes. One day when the... Nope. The winter advanced and an entire revolution of the seasons had taken place since I awoke to life. My attention at this time was solely directed towards my plan of introducing myself into the cottage of my protectors. I revolved many projects, but that one which I finally fixated was to enter the dwelling when the blind old man should be alone. I had stagnancy enough to discover that the unnatural hideousness of my person was the chief object of terror which those had formerly beheld me. How much do you curse, and what are your thoughts about it? I don't actually curse that much. The usual streamer of this channel curses a fair amount. And my thoughts on curses are, for the most part, that they are just words. Obviously, there are some words that they mean more to other people in particular demographics and should be avoided. But there are some curse words that are just used for extra description, and are some okay to use. But you do need to keep up on these things most of the time. For example, I was having a conversation today, actually, about the C word. Now, in the UK, the C word was something that was never really said, and it was seen as probably the worst curse word you could ever use. However, of recent times, thanks to a particular TV show that was very adult and very popular, and the internet having a lot of Australians that do love to use that word, it's become a lot more widely used now, and it's generally quite shocking to hear it, you know. So, yes, it all depends. Have I understood correctly that he wants to come out to the people for some kind of trial, and it is his free decision? So it's not a kind of trial. It is a trial that he needs to go through as himself. But for the most part, he just wants to... He wants to introduce himself to them, but he is terrified of their reactions, and he sees this as a trial. He sees this as something that will affect his whole future, because his future that he wants is to live with these people. He wants to be accepted. Correct. That is what he wants. You're a witch, though. You curse people you don't like. Well, yes, of course I do, of course. Or, as SpongeBob said, sentence enhancers. Correct, Boris, correct. Wait, what his protectors think of him right now? They do not. They are completely unaware of him right now. He calls them his protectors and his friends, but he has never once actually conversed with them. He goes out at night when they are asleep, and the most they think, and then he gathers firewood for them and leaves it for them in the morning, but that is the only interaction he has actually had with them. Everything he has learned about them, he has learned from listening to them talking in the cottage. He has not actually revealed himself to them yet. And that is what he will be doing. Hello, folks! Welcome! Hello! You've said hello then. Welcome. The chief object of horror with those who had formerly beheld me. My voice, although harsh, had nothing terrible in it. I thought, therefore, that if in the absence of his children I could get the good will and meditation of the old De Lacy, I might, by his means, be tolerated by my younger protectors. Imagine meeting some creep who stalked you for a while, introducing him, and looking like a walking 2-meter corpse. Yes, exactly. This may not go well for our good old Frankie. So Frankenstein is in the attic. No, he is in the pigsty outside. He is not... He's a baby. He is a baby. He does not understand. He just wants a hug. He just wants someone to pat him on the head and accept him for who he is. That is all he wants. He's just a baby. He's just a baby. One day, when the sun shone, and on the red leaves that strewed the ground and diffused cheerfulness, although it denied warmth, Sapphy, Agatha, and Felix departed on a long country walk, and the old man, at his own desire, was left alone in the cottage. I mean, he's so smart, in sense, to approach the blind man first. Yes, he is. To be honest, yes. It's a good plan. It's a good plan. It would be weird if he lived in the attic. It kind of would, yes. Very weird. Hey, Newlock, is Frankenstein your baby boy? No, of course not. I wouldn't have made him so deformed. That was just kind of rude on Frankenstein's part. Also, Frankenstein is not the monster. You need to remember that, Void. Frankenstein is the creator, not the monster. Although he is technically the monster. That is the whole point of that is the whole point. That the monster is the victim. And the professor is the monster. Yes. When his children had departed, he took up his guitar and played several mournful but sweet airs, more sweet and mournful than I had ever heard him play before. At first his countenance was illuminated with pleasure, but as he continued, thoughtfulness and sadness succeeded. At length, laying aside the instrument, he sat absorbed in reflection. My heart beat quick. This was this hour and moment of trial, which would decide my hopes or realize my fears. The servants were gone to a neighbouring fair. All was silent, and around the cottage it was an excellent opportunity, yet when I proceeded to execute my plan, my limbs failed me. and I sank to the ground again. I rose, and exerting all firmness of which I was master, removed the planks which I had placed before my hovel to conceal my retreat. The fresh air revived me, and with renewed determination I approached the door of their cottage. I knocked. "Who is there?" said the old man. "Come in." I entered. "Pardon the intrusion," said I. "I am a traveller in want of a little rest. It would greatly oblige me if you would allow me to remain a few minutes before the fire." Whoa, I guess so many people think that Frankenstein is a 2-meter lonesome baby and not the creator, by the way, which of a person he was. It's kind of like how you would assume Red from Pokemon and Ash Ketchum is Ash Ketchum, Link is Zelda, and Samus is Metroid. Correct, very much correct. "Enter," said De Lacy, "and I will try in what manner I can to relieve your wants. But unfortunately my children are from home, and I am blind. I am afraid I shall find it difficult to procure food for you. Do not trouble yourself, my kind host. I have food. It is the warmth and rest only that I need." I sat down, and a silence ensued. I knew that every minute was precious to me, yet I remained irresolute in what manner to commence the interview, when the old man addressed me. "By your language, stranger, I suppose you are my countryman. Are you French?" "No, but I was educated by a French family, and understand the language only. I am now going to claim the protection of some friends whom I sincerely love, and of whose favour I have some hopes." "Are they Germans?" "No, they are French, but let us change the subject. I am an unfortunate and deserted creature. I look around, and I have no relation or friend upon this earth. These amiable people to whom who have never seen me, and know little of me. I am full of fears, for if I fail there, I am an outcast of the world forever." Does that mean that Newlark is Briny because the name of the show is Briny Rose Smith? No, I'm not Briny, I'm Newlark. I don't know, you're getting things confusing now, Void. It's all confusing. Let's just read the book. "Do not despair. To be friendless is indeed to be unfortunate. But the hearts of men, when unprepared by any obvious self-interest, are full of brotherly love and charity. Rely, therefore, on your hopes, and if these friends are good and amiable, do not despair." Newlark is my name. Yes, when I first possessed the body of Briny Rose Smith at the start of Halloween, we played a little game in which I gave my viewers clues every stream as to guess my name. And when they were able to guess my name, they were able to banish me from Briny's body. But we did have a discussion afterwards, and Briny has allowed me, with consent, to repossess her body at times of reading Frankenstein and to finish the Bioshock game that I was playing. And we finished Bioshock this week, so I will still be back for Frankenstein until we finish it. But Newlark is my name. Why? Because it is my name. I seem to share it with a rather large orc woman from the first book that was read on this channel. Because she's a witch that chose to be an orc in an RPG game, now she calls herself the perfect... I wasn't ever an orc, I just share the name. So you were lonely as this creature to manifest... No, of course not. Of course not. I'm not that pathetic. Why would you ever say that? Barker! Shut up! That's... What, Mr. Max? Mr. Max, you're making such assumptions here. Terrible. Shut up. They are kind. They are the most excellent creatures in the world, but unfortunately, they are prejudiced against me. I have good dispositions. My life has been hitherto harmless, and in some degree beneficial. But a fatal prejudice clouds the eyes, and where they ought to see feeling and kind friend, they behold only a detestable monster. I'm not lonely. What are you talking about? And after Frankenstein, we'll never see her again. I don't know about that. I'm not letting that happen. We're going to renegotiate after Frankenstein, obviously. Obviously! That is indeed unfortunate. But if you're really blameless, cannot you undeceive them? I am about to undertake that task, and it is on that account that I feel so many overwhelming terrors. I tenderly love these friends I have, unknown to them, been for many months in the habits of daily kindness towards them, but they believe that I wish to injure them, and it is that prejudice which I wish to overcome. Where do these friends reside? Near this spot. The old man, not what Bryony says. Well, I don't care what she says. She's a pitiful mortal. What can she even do to me? I could steal her whole channel if I wanted to. But no, I do believe that I'm not as popular for some reason, because people don't have good taste. So, I have to take a step back, and I understand that. But I will not be gone forever. And she can't do anything about it. Are you off? Thank you for the comfy reading stream. We got to go. Well, have a lovely day, Rare Candy Guy. Have a lovely day. Goodbye. I really enjoy the commentary by this creature. He is very eloquent, is he not? Yeah, you poke it with a stick and it makes funny, angry noises. The new summit of Bryony's head demons and all alike about her body possessions. What? Whatever. Book. The old man paused, then continued. If you will unreservedly confide to me the particulars of your tale, I perhaps may be of use in undeceiving them. I am blind and cannot judge you of your countenance, but there is something in your words that persuades me that you are sincere. I am poor and in exile, but it will afford me a true pleasure to be in any way serviceable to a human creature. Excellent, man! I thank you and accept your generous offer. You raise me from the dust by its kindness, and I trust that, by your aid, I shall not be driven from the society and sympathy of your fellow creatures. Heaven forbid, even if you were really criminal, for that can only drive you to desperation, and not investigate you to virtue. I also am unfortunate. I and my family have been condemned, although innocent. Judge, therefore, if I do not feel for your misfortunes. How can I thank you, my best and only benefactor? From your lips I have heard the voice of kindness directed towards me. I shall be forever grateful, and your present humanity assures me of success with those friends whom I am on the point of meeting. May I know the names and residence of those friends? I paused. It sounds like DeLacy understood it's all in truth. Yes, DeLacy at least seems to understand that the monster is innocent. This, I thought, was the moment of decision. which was to rob me or bestow happiness on me forever. I struggled vainly for firmness, sufficient to answer him, but the effort destroyed all my remaining strength. I sank in the chair and sobbed aloud. At that moment I heard the steps of my younger protectors. I had not a moment to lose, but seizing the hand of the old man I cried, "Now is the time! Save me and protect me. You and your family are the friends whom I seek. Do not desert me in the hour of trial." "Great God!" exclaimed the old man. "Who are you?" In that instant the cottage door was opened, and Felix, Safie, and Agatha entered. Who can describe their horror and consternation on beholding me? Agatha fainted, and Safie, unable to attend to her friend, rushed into the cottage. Felix darted forward with supernatural force and tore me from his father, to whose knees I clung in transport of fury. He dashed me to the ground and struck me violently with a stick. I could have torn him limb from limb, as the lion rends the antelope, but my heart sank within me as bitter sickness, and I refrained. I saw him on the point of repeating his blow, when, overcome by pain and anguish, I quitted the cottage, and in general tumult escaped unperceived to my hovel. Oh. Cursed Creator! Why did I live? Why in that instant did I not extinguish the spark of existence which you have so wantonly bestowed? I know not. Despair had not yet taken possession of me. My feelings were those of ragged and revenge. I could with pleasure have destroyed the cottage and its inhabitants, and have glutted myself with their shrieks and misery. When the night came, I quitted my retreat and wandered into the wood. And now, no longer strained by the fear of discovery, I gave vent to my anguish in fearful howlings. I was like a wild beast that had broken the toils, destroying the objects that obstructed me, and ranging through the woods with stag-like swiftness. Oh, what a miserable night I passed! The cold stars shone in mockery. The bare trees waved their branches above me. Now and then the sweet voice of a bird burst forth amidst the universal stillness. All save I were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch-fiend, bore a hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. But this was a luxury of sensation that I could not endure. I became fatigued with excess of bodily exertion. I sank on the damp grass in the sick impotence of despair. Yes, he is a sad, sad creature. There was none among the myriads of men that existed who would pity or assist me. And should I feel kindness towards my enemies? No. From that moment I declared everlasting war against the species, and more than all against him who had formed me and sent me forth to this insupportable misery. The sun rose. I heard the voices of men and knew that it was impossible to return to my retreat during the day. Accordingly, I hid myself in some thick underwood, determining to devote the ensuing hours to reflection upon my situation. The pleasant sunshine and pure air of the day. Well, yeah, in a way, yes. he is a corpse, or at least pieces of a corpse that have been put together and brought to life. So yes, in a way, this is basically a zombie talking, yes. The pleasant sunshine and the pure air of day restored me to some degrees of tranquillity, and when I considered what had passed at the cottage, I could not help believing that I had been too hasty in my conclusions. I had certainly acted imprudently. It was apparent that my conversation had interested the father in my behalf, and I was a fool in having exposed my person to the horror of my person to the horror of his children. I ought to have familiarized myself, the old De Lacy to me, and by degrees to have discovered myself to the rest of the family. When they should have been prepared for my approach, but I did not believe my errors were irretrievable, and after much consideration I resolved to return to the cottage, seek the old man, and by my representations win him to my party. These thoughts calmed me, and in the afternoon I sank into a profound sleep. But the fervour of my blood did not allow me to visit peaceful dreams. The horrible scene of the preceding day was for ever acting before my eyes. The females were flying, and the enraged Felix tearing me from his father's feet. I awoke exhausted, and finding that it was already night, I crept forth from my hiding-place, and went in search of food. What if this fusion were introduced in Resident Evil? Is it not already? By fusion, I assume you mean the fact that he has put together body parts. Surely a lot of the Resident Evil characters can be like that too. I imagine beings such as Tyrant and Nemesis were likely put together pieces. I doubt that all of their body mass was originally a person. If only he could learn to write. Yes, he could be a pen pal for a wee while. He does know how to write, but I suppose he doesn't actually have the equipment to do so. Oh, I am nearly running out of water. This is terrible. He has learned how to read. He learned because they were teaching the foreigner how to read, the Arabian woman, Safi. So he followed along with them, and then he found an abandoned trunk that had some books in as well, so he found through those. So he very much does know how to read and write, and speak. I thought they just put the virus into people to make them big guys. I don't know. But I safely assume that there's got to be at least one Resident Evil monster that is multiple people. If it's not, then I'm kind of surprised that it isn't. When my hunger was appeased, I directed my steps towards the well-known path that conducted to the cottage. All there was at peace. I crept to my hovel and remained in silent expectation of the accustomed hour when the family arose. That hour passed. The sun mounted high in the heavens, but the cottagers did not appear. I trembled violently, apprehending some dreadful misfortune. The inside of the cottage was dark. I heard no motion. I could not describe the agony of this suspense. Presently 2 countrymen passed by, but pausing near the cottage, they entered into conversation, using violent gesticulations. But I did not understand what they said, as they spoke in the language of the country, which differed from that of my protectors. Soon after, however, Felix approached with another man. I was surprised, as I knew he had not quitted the cottage that morning, and waited anxiously to discover from his discourse the meaning of these unusual appearances. "Do you consider," said his companion, "that you will be obliged to pay 3 months' rent to lose the produce of your garden? I do not wish to take any unfair advantage, and I beg, therefore, that you will take some days to consider your determination." "It's utterly useless," replied Felix. "We can never inhabit your cottage. The life of my father is in the greatest danger, owing to the dreadful circumstances that I have related. My wife and my sister will never recover from their horror. I entreat you do not reason with me any more. Take possession of your tenement, and let me fly from this place." Felix trembled violently as he said this. He and his companion entered the cottage, in which they remained for a few minutes, and they departed. I never saw any of the family or de Lacy any more. He's not behind on the rent. I believe it is a fine for his lease or something along those lines. I continued for the remainder of the day in my hovel, in a state of utter stupid despair. My protectors had departed, and had broken the only link that held me to the world. For the first time, the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom. I did not strive to control them, but allowing myself to be borne away from the stream, I bent my mind towards injury and death. When I thought of my friends, of the mild voice of de Lacy, the gentle eyes of Agatha, and the exquisite beauty of the Arabian, these thoughts vanished, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger, and unable to injure anything human, I turned my fury towards inanimate objects. As night advanced, I placed a variety of combustibles around the cottage, and after having destroyed every vestige of cultivation in the garden, I waited with force of impatience until the moon had sunk to commence my operations. He has not followed Felix, because at this point he cannot. They have left him, they have spurned him. They believe that he is there to harm their father. They will not be allowed any closer. Because he's a wonderfully written character, Void, an absolutely wonderful written character. Everyone would be angry at such a thing. As the night advanced, a fierce wind arose from the woods, and quickly dispersed the clouds that had loitered in the heavens. I thought he at least had a strain of hope to follow. I think he did, until he saw that the cottage had been emptied, that they had reacted so badly to him, that they had abandoned their residence in a matter of a night. That signed... I would say sign the death wishes, but there is no death wishes here. But it sent a rather strong message to him, is what I'm getting. That they may never see him the way he wants them to see him. And that is his trial. He has been found guilty of being a wretch. The blast tore along like a mighty avalanche and produced the kind of insanity in my spirits that burst all bounds of reason and reflection. I lighted the dry branch of a tree and danced with fury around the devoted cottage, my eyes still fixed on the western horizon, the edge of which the moon nearly touched. A part of this orb was at length hid, and I waved my branch. It sank, and with a loud scream I fired the straw and earth and bushes which I had collected. The wind fanned the fire, and the cottage was quickly enveloped with flames, which clung to it and licked it with their forked and destroying tongues. As soon as I was convinced that no assistance could save any part of the habitation, I quitted the scene and sought for refuge in the woods. And now, with the world before me, whither should I bend my steps? I resolved to fly far from the scene of my misfortunes, but to me, hated and despised, every country must be equally horrible. At length the thought of you crossed my mind. I learned from your papers that you were my father, my creator, and to whom I could apply with more fitness than to him who had given me life. Among the lessons that Felix had bestowed upon Safie, geography had not been admitted. I had learned from these relative situations of the different countries of the earth, and you had mentioned Geneva as the name of your native town, and towards this place I resolved to proceed. But how was I to direct myself? I knew that I must travel in a southwesterly direction to reach my destination, but the sun was my only guide. I did not know the names of the towns that I was to pass, nor could I ask information from a single human being. But I did not despair. From you only could I hope for succor, although towards you I felt no sentiment but that of hatred. Unfeeling, heartless creator! You had endowed me with perceptions and passions, and then cast me abroad unobjective for the scorn and horror of mankind. But on you only had I any claim for pity and redress, and from you I determined to seek that justice which I vainly attempted to gain from any other being that wore the human form. So for him it was an adventure time to his final destination, to revenge, and something interesting could happen along the way. Well, I suppose so. But I think he's very conflicted in himself. A part of him wants that revenge, but a part of him also wants acceptance. Hey chat, did you know I took Nulak's hat once time and she didn't like it? Also, Nulak is giving out magic lessons. Don't listen to Void. Void is a liar and a traitor. Sounds like Angela from Library of Runa, who seeks revenge in her final book. Coming through an adventure. Yes! That is very similar to Angela, actually. Created and then put through horrible things. Except she hasn't... No magic lessons, no. You pitiful mortals do not deserve it. You all just hurt yourselves. There's no point. Whenever humans learn magic, they just end up causing an apocalypse. So they end up forgetting the magic and starting again. So I'm not causing that again, okay? My travels were long and the suffering I endured intense. It was late autumn when I quitted the district where I had so long resided. Angela was given a mind only to suffer, and decided to make revenge. Yes, I am going to say I am in the middle of playing Ruiner, as you probably noticed, so please keep a light on some of the spoilers if you do say anything. I am starting to learn that from Angela. But I'm still learning the details of such things, so please be aware of that. But yes, it's even worse for old Frankie here, because he was made because he could. Victor had no real purpose for him, he just made him because he could. You sound like a good guy, saying that... So are you sure you're evil? Of course I'm evil. Of course I'm evil. Evil is not black and white. Just because I'm evil does not mean I cannot say good things every so often. Don't put me in a box, Void. Don't put me in a box. And the sun... Yes, evil can sympathise with good. There are tones of grey all over the world. All over my soul! No, Boris, I am the most evilest soul out there. I am just smart and empathetic too. I travelled only at night, fearful of encountering the visage of a human being. Nature decayed around me, and the sun became heartless. Rain and snow poured around me. Mighty rivers were frozen, and the surface of the earth was hard and chill and bizarre. I found no shelter. Oh, earth, how often did I appreciate curses on the cause of my being? The mindlessness of my nature had fled, and all within me was turned to gall and bitterness. The nearer I approached your habitation, the more deeply did I feel the spirit of revenge enkindling my heart. Snow fell and the waters were hardened, but I rested not. A few incidents now and then directed me, and I possessed a map of the country, but I often wandered wide from my path. The agony of my feelings allowed me no respite. No incident occurred from which my rage and misery could not extract its food. But a circumstance which happened when I arrived on the confines of Switzerland, when the sun had recovered its warmth and the earth again began to look green, I confirmed in a special manner the bitterness and horror of my feelings. I generally resided during the day, and travelled only when I was secured by night from the view of man. One morning, however, finding my path lay through a deep wood, I ventured to continue my journey after the sun had arisen. The day, which was one of the first of spring, I cheered even me by the loneliness of its sunshine and the balminess of the air. I felt emotions of gentleness and pleasure that had long appeared dead revive within me. Half surprised by the novelty of these sensations, I allowed myself to be borne away by them, and forgetting my solitude and deformity, dared to be happy. Soft tears again bedewed my cheeks, and I even raised my humid eyes with thankfulness towards the blessed sun, which bestowed such joy upon me. Oh yes, I'm pure evil. Of course I'm pure evil. By the way, I have a thought to force the Frankenstein to create another construct like him, so he wouldn't be alone. I believe that's where Bride of Frankenstein came from, but I believe she is only a movie adaptation, rather than an actual book adaptation. I'm not sure if Mary ever did do a sequel. I continued to wend among the paths of the wood, until I came to its boundary, which skirted by a deep and rapid river, to which many of the trees bent their branches, now budding with fresh spring. Here I paused, not exactly knowing what path to pursue, when I heard the sounds of voices that induced me to conceal myself under the shade of a cypress. I was scarcely hidden when a young girl came running towards the spot where I concealed, laughing as if she ran from someone in sport. She continued her course along the precipitous sides of the river, when suddenly her foot slipped. She fell into the rapid stream. I rushed for my hiding space, and with extreme labour from the force of the current, saved her and dragging her to shore. She was senseless, and I endeavoured by every means in my power to restore animation, when I was suddenly interrupted by the approach of a rustic, who was probably the person from whom she had playfully fled. Upon seeing me, he darted towards me, tearing the girl from my arms, hastened towards the deeper part of the woods. I followed speedily, I hardly knew why, but when the man saw me draw near, he aimed his gun, which he carried, at my body and fired. I sank to the ground. My injurer increased swiftness and escaped into the woods. This was the reward of my benevolence. I had saved a human being from destruction, and as a recompense I now writhed under the miserable pain of a wound which shattered the flesh and bone. The feelings of kindness and gentleness, which I had entertained but a few moments ago, gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Inflamed by pain, I vowed eternal hatred and vengeance to all mankind. But the agony of my wound overcame me. My pulses paused. I fainted. For some weeks, I led a miserable life. In the woods, endeavouring to cure the wound which I had received. The ball had entered my shoulder. I knew not whether it had remained there or passed through. At any rate, I had no means of extracting it. My sufferings were augmented by the oppressive sense of the injustice. Yes, the monster can get hurt by gun. The monster can get hurt by guns, but he is pretty much alive. It's just, probably this is the worst pain he's ever felt. You know, physically, not emotionally. Emotionally, he's probably done worse already. And in gratitude of their infliction, my daily vows rose for vengeance, a deep and deadly revenge, such as would alone compensate for the outrages and anguish I endured. And you know what you need to endure right now? The fact that I need to end this stream. You've had an extra 10 minutes again, because I was getting into the story. This keeps happening this week. You keep getting long streams. You're so goddamn spoiled, all of you. Absolutely spoiled. Every single one of you. Spoiled. You've been getting so many extra minutes of me this week. Well, her as well. The briny, you know. But me. I found your channel by thingies. How far am I in it? I have not long gotten to thingamajig. Star of the City, yes. I've not long unlocked Star of the City. I believe I tried one of the nodes recently, but I did not get through it. You have all been very lucky. I didn't say anything about you being fat. I can't make you fat by watching me, but I can spoil you with my presence. You are all very lucky, and you should be absolutely grateful that I am in your lives. Yes. What are your thoughts about backseating? I prefer not. I prefer that people don't tell me anything. And if I do feel like I need some help with the abnos or figuring something out, I will usually ask. And then you can backseat. But only when I ask for something specifically. But for the most part, I do like be able to figure things out myself. You are spoiled in the sense of a carton can be spoiled. Well, New Luck's presence is sugar and it's sweet to have her. And I crash when she's gone. You will crash when I am gone, as you should. No tips without asking. Yes. I don't mind like deck building tips and things like that, but the abnos I especially do not like people telling me how to do them. Or the realization things. I like being able to hit my head against the wall for a little while and figure it out myself, you know. That's kind of the fun of the game, and I don't want that taken away from me. But yes, as you can tell by that large yawn, deck building tips are in fact okay. In fact, there is a channel in the Discord where a few people have suggested me decks already. Can you sing My Way if Bernie gets rid of you forever? But if Bernie got rid of me forever, how would I sing it? There is a fault in your logic. Yeah, so some deck building tips is okay. mean, if I'm playing and you have a suggestion, like for example, I started building a burn decks. And if you had a suggestion for a good card that fit the burn decks while I was building them, I would not be annoyed if you suggested said card while I was building said deck. But anything in terms of the actual battles, I like to try to figure out myself. Anyway, that's something you should ask me when I play Library of Ruina on Tuesday. And this will be it for me this week. Woo! I will be back tomorrow. Well, Bryony will be back with the block game tomorrow. Good old Minecraft. Where we will be going to the end. How exciting! Can Newlock exist without Bryony and Bryony without Newlock? Bryony can exist without Newlock, but I cannot stream without Bryony, unfortunately. I do need a body. My real body isn't really something that you mortals can comprehend. You see, I'm a visitor to the library that Bryony is trapped in, and I saw her streaming, and I wanted to try it for myself, so I took her body and I streamed. And it was fun, and I did enjoy it. But she has existed without me. So you're the weaker? How dare you! No, I am much more powerful than she is. I am a being that you cannot comprehend. She is but a mortal being, trapped in a library. I am much better than her in every respect. So what if I found your real avatar body? Then you would go insane, evidently. I told you, you can't comprehend it. I am from a whole nother world that does not work on any of the rules of this one. So, you won't be able to use my body. But yes. If you have not already, I would highly appreciate it if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. As you can see, I am well on my way to 1K, and I would be highly appreciative if you could help me get there by liking and so you're like Frankie. I'm not like Frankie. I'm not like Frankie. I'm not lonely. Shut up. Incomprehensible to look, but highly human. Shut up. Shut up, Mr. Max. Shut up. I don't like this. I don't like this comparison at all. Yeah. But yes, leave likes and subscribes. If you would like to support me in any other way, there is the Discord you can join and join in with all the fun there. You can support me on Kofi and get some nice short story audios. You can support me through Patreon, where you get some exclusive streams and short stories every month. Yes, wonderful, exciting things. Also, look forward to my fifth book coming out next month. I will see you on Monday. No, I'm not human. Not human at all. You're all just very silly and equating me to something you understand, but I suppose that's your mortal ways, is it not? I will see you mortals next Sunday. Please enjoy your stupid mortal streamer until then. I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Bryony Rose Smith /Actual Newlock /Witch Bryony, live from the Forbidden Library. Goodbye.